It's
Yeah, there's downtown.
There's a Coconut Beach Hotel, that's what I remember.
gotta order your official one. Okay. Thank you. All right, are you ready?
Right.
Ready? Okay, calling the City Council regular meeting to order here for Monday, March the 2nd, 2020 at City Hall. We start with the closed session, and let's see, could we have the roll call, Madam City Clerk?
Absolutely. Councilmember Burke,
Here.
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember Rollins,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Munoz-Schnapp,
Here.
and Mayor Hernandez is absent for the record.
Yes, Mayor Hernandez has an excused absence. So at this point in the agenda, we ask for public comment from the public. And so seeing that there isn't anyone here in the chamber, let's move on to the closed session item. Mr. City Attorney, can you announce the items? that we
Yes,
have
thank you,
before us?
Mayor Pro Tem. There are two items for closed session this evening. The first is a conference with property negotiators under the authority of Government Code Section 54956.8. The properties involved are the vacant property on the west side of Market Street between Scott Street and Port Hueneme Road in the city of Port Hueneme. Assessor parcel numbers 206-0-091-285 through 305. The agency negotiators are Brad Connor, City Manager, Charles Green, City Attorney, Steve Kinney, Consultant, Karis Navigating. The negotiating parties, the City of Port Hueneme and the successor agency to the Port Hueneme Redevelopment Agency under negotiation, price and terms of purchase. The second is a labor item, conference with labor negotiators. The authority is Government Code Section 54957.6. The designated representatives of the city are Brad Connor, City Manager, Charles Peretz, Deputy City Manager, and Ken McDonald, Finance Director. The employee association involved is the Port Hueneme Police Officers Association, and those are the only two matters.
Okay, thank you so much. And with that, it's 5:32, and we will recess to closed session, and we will return at 6:30. Do we have everyone coming for these? Do you know? We do.
Don't worry about it. Or Dr. T, you know, Dr.
So, get a presentation.
So they told me that they asked you and they were supposed to be submitted by noon today for our IT department to load. Let me see if I can hunt down our IT department. They said they hadn't heard back on whether you had a presentation, so we just kind of assumed that there wasn't any PowerPoint to go with it. Due by noon the day of the meeting, but let me hunt down our IT and see what they can do. Give me just one moment. They run our whole meeting, but I'm not sure how quickly we can get something uploaded. Do you have it on? How are you?
I need to get that form.
The Form 700?
I think that's what it is. You sent me an email, but you know what, I don't know how to use that. I entered it in recently.
Did you?
Anyway, I can pick one up in there, right?
Yeah, if you can see, can you move in tomorrow? Or anytime, I can leave it at the front desk for you just to grab.
Okay, yeah,
I'll do
I
that.
can go tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Of course. No, I'm gonna shoot him over an email. See if I can look up his cell phone number. He's coming right now. Of course. Oh no! Yeah, they'll get you set up.
Halfway through, I'm getting at least people this because I was under the weather, you know, last week, you know, so.
It's going around so bad. Everybody's getting sick lately.
Yeah.
This is our IT
I was
guru.
bragging last week, you know, 2 weeks ago. The storm. Bam! You
This
know.
is Curtis, so he can help
Hi
you out.
Curtis, I got a presentation, PowerPoint. Oh, so you're going to take it?
Yeah, I'm gonna load it up there for
Okay.
you. Can you grab the keyboard?
Yeah.
I think it's Port Wainini. There are 4 presentation books.
Oh, there's 4 of them?
Yeah.
Here, let Hey,
I had verified.
okay, so
Is
this top one?
that
No.
one?
Okay.
All right.
Oh,
I see Rich.
that's right.
Where's Will?
Oh, I haven't.
Hello. Like this album. Oh, hi. We did.
Sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer
Yeah,
King. Yeah. Very
Great to
good.
see you.
Very
We're
good.
so
Good to
glad,
see you
we're so
too.
glad you're here to make a presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. A pleasure.
Hey, did you get my email? Okay. Did you write me back? You didn't write me back, did you? Oh. I didn't ignore it.
Have a clicker up at the podium, so when it's your turn, just grab the clicker and just start going.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Hello.
Talking about scheduling some time for you to meet. Do you know what's going on in Thailand? Pardon? And you can breathe during that, right? You can breathe during that. I'm not gonna like have you say it all in one fell swoop. Let's see. Hey, Johnny.
This is my
midterm. Yeah. All right, thanks. Hey, Christy, this is like the same article I read online. It's like, I think I know what you're talking about that you said, was in the paper.
And we're all going like, actually not me.
I know. It's like, so what do you think we're doing here?
And there was one also today in the Star about us not doing anything about the vaping ordinance and all that. And we're like, we already passed that. And we totally said like that we weren't doing anything.
Somebody's not doing it.
And I was like, we've already done past that ordinance. I'm tempted to send them a copy. They didn't send me that thing, but I'm gonna send them a signed copy of our ordinance so they can see we took action on that like over a month ago. No, somebody's not doing their due diligence.
That sounds like that's what's going on over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the first presentation, Wedding Rose Monthly.
Mm-hmm.
Erin Entry is here.
Okay.
So I want to just call her up and she can kick it off. If you
So
promise
you
to
don't-
be- She has the usual
Okay.
here with her.
So you don't want me to like present because I have a certificate for him.
Right, yeah. And I think just let her.
Okay. She's executive. Yeah. Okay. So it's on? Yep. Okay.
It's showtime.
Okay. Okay, everyone, it's 6:30 and we're calling the City Council regular meeting back to order here. We had recess to close session, so at this point, we will then do a flag salute followed by the inspiration, and the flag salute will be done by Council Member Rich Rollins.
Everybody, put your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I have the privilege of presenting the inspiration tonight. So as you know, Women's History Month is recognized in March each year. And with that, we celebrate, or should celebrate, the achievements, empowerment, and success women have had, both locally and nationally. Inasmuch as we are in this year, known as 2020, one valiant effort began more than 100 years ago, actually in 1848, and we celebrate the anniversary of the women's suffrage movement and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment was passed by Congress June 4th of 1919 and ratified on August 18, 1920. And the amendment reads as follows: "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation." The states that were first to ratify the 19th Amendment were Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin. Tennessee was the last of the 36, and California was the 18th state, which meant that the 19th Amendment was midway into becoming law. And interestingly enough, in California, women had the right to vote in 1911, but the 19th Amendment meant that this was going to be federally reserved. And as we head into March, let's remember to acknowledge the women who got us here, the women who championed the suffrage movement, and all, both men and women, that it took to ratify our 19th Amendment. Thank you. Okay, so with that, Madam City Clerk, will you call roll?
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Burke,
Here.
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember Rollins,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Munoz,
Here.
and Mayor Hernandez is absent for the record.
So Mayor Hernandez has an excused absence. We have the agenda to approve before us.
I'd like to move approval.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None. So motion carries unanimously. We will then recess, I believe. Oh, no, we have the report on the City Council closed session action. So, Mr. City Attorney, would you like to report out on what happened in closed session?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I am able to announce that we had 2 closed sessions tonight, one property negotiation and one labor, and there are no reportable actions from either matter.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, at 6:34, we will recess the City Council meeting to then go into the Housing Authority meeting. And so with that, Member Brown, will you join us here?
Thank you. Thanks.
So calling the Housing Authority meeting to order, Madam City Clerk, can you take roll?
Yes. Member Berg,
Here.
Member Brown,
Here.
Member Gama,
Still here.
Member Rollins,
Here.
and Vice Chair Munoz,
Here.
and Chair Hernandez is absent.
Yes, so Chair Hernandez is still absent, but she has an excused absence. Let's look at the agenda for the Housing Authority. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move approval.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Would you like to take a voice vote? Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, so motion carries unanimously. We have the agenda. And then we go into general public comment for the Housing Authority. So we reserve 10 minutes here on the agenda for anyone in the audience wishing to speak on matters not on the agenda, but that have to do with Housing Authority. So seeing none, we then go into looking at the consent calendar agenda for the Housing Authority. And as the vice chair here, I will read the titles of the items on the consent calendar prior to the motion. So we have 2 items. The first one are the minutes of the Housing Authority regular meeting of December 2nd, 2019. And then the second item is finance cash disbursements for November 23, 2019 through February 24, 2020. And is there a motion on the consent calendar agenda?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So motion carries unanimously. And let's see. Then we have item number 3, which is the business item for Housing Authority. And Ms. Basua, you're going to present this. This is appointment of an executive director for the Port Hueneme Housing Authority.
Yes,
ahead.
good evening, members of the board and staff. It'll be a quick action here. Staff is recommending that you adopt a resolution appointing Mr. Brad Connors as the executive director for the Housing Authority.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
All right, super. And so would there be somebody who is going to make the motion?
Move we approve.
Oh, yes.
Can you read the title of the actual resolution?
Yes.
The record.
Yeah, so this is the recommendation to adopt a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority of the City of Port Hueneme, California, approving the appointment of Brad Connors to serve as the new Executive Director for the Port Hueneme Housing Authority. Okay,
Now I move approval.
all right, so motion and a second. All right, so would you like to do a roll call, please?
Member Berg,
Yes.
Member Gama,
Yes.
Member Brown,
Yes.
Member Rollins,
Yes.
Vice Chair Munoz-Stott,
Yes.
and Mayor Hernandez, or Chair Hernandez is absent for the record.
Yes, so 501 vote, so motion carries. Thank you. And then we are at the item here for the members of this housing authority to report, make any comments, and request future agenda items. So we'll start with you, Member Brown.
All I want to say is good evening, and I have no comment at this time.
Okay, all right. Are there any others that would like to speak on anything for Housing Authority? Okay, so with that, then, we will adjourn the Housing Authority to the next regular meeting scheduled for April 6th, 2020, to be held here at 6:30 in the council chambers. So thank you, Member Brown.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will reconvene the city council regular meeting here, 6:39. And we have public comment. So this is for the council meeting, and this is where speakers who want to speak on something not on the agenda may do so at this time. We usually reserve about 30 minutes on the agenda to take up some things that folks have from the public. Anyone wishing to speak on matters not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, then we will move into presentations. And we will start here with the Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year Award. And we do have the young man here with his family, I believe, and that is Bryan Vasquez. And so at this time, Aaron Antrim, the CEO of the Oxnard Boys and Girls Club, would you like to say a few words? And then I do have a certificate I'd like to present Bryan Vasquez. So would you say your words first, and then I'll join you down there at the podium.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here tonight. With me tonight, I have our 2020 Youth of the Year, Bryan Vasquez. He competed amongst 6 other teenagers, young people from Oxnard and Port Hueneme Boys and Girls Club, and I'm proud to announce that he was named the 2020 Youth of the Year. Bryan is the first member from the Port Hueneme Boys and Girls Club to be the Youth of the Year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
And he will, next Monday, March 9th, Bryan will be traveling up to Solvang, California, to compete amongst 9 other young people from other Boys and Girls Clubs in Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo County. So Bryan is going to not only represent the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Oxnard and Port Hueneme really well, but he's going to represent the city of Port Hueneme really well. So I want to turn it over to him for a brief moment.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Bryan.
Hi. Can
Hello.
you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
good.
we can.
So, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good too.
Tell us a little bit about how you got to this place of being recognized as the Youth of the Year.
Well, it took a lot of work because I had to create a lot of resumes and long essays and learn how to say a speech in front of people. So it did take a lot of dedication and hard work. But ultimately, it took a lot of confidence in order for me to get it, because that's what they want to see. They want to reward someone who's willing to have pride in what they represent, and that's something that I'm currently working up towards too. And it's a really good thing for me too, because it has affected my life really positively. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Are there any comments from my council colleagues here? Councilmember Rollins?
I was impressed that you're applying to a number of colleges.
Oh Oh, yes.
And 10 years from now, what would you like to be doing as a result of that?
10 years from now. Well, I think I do want to continue pursuing a career and being a professor at a university, because I would like to teach Chicano studies and literature and writing, because I'm really passionate about those things. So I want to be able to not only be a teacher for high schoolers, but also work my way up towards being a professor at any university that I wish to do.
Awesome. Councilmember Gama.
Congratulations on being accepted to a couple of universities. I know we talked briefly and that you're continuing to apply and write those essays, and hopefully you'll get to have many choices. And so we're really happy that you come from the city of Port Hueneme and Hueneme High School, and we want to wish you well, and we'd love to see you someday teaching and realizing your dream.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Yes, I have been accepted into 2 schools already. I've been accepted into CSUCI and Humboldt State University, which are 2 of the schools that I really look forward to going to. But ultimately, I'm working my way up towards a UC school, and the way I've been working up towards that is by getting a higher than a 4.0, which I currently do have right now. And on top of that, I do extracurriculars, like I'm vice president of Keystone, which is a youth program at the Boys and Girls Club. I'm also doing track and field, which I'm a varsity runner in, and it's a lot of hard work, but it takes a lot of dedication and pride, and it's something that's really doing me good.
Very good. Councilmember Berg.
Yes, congratulations, Brian. I think you'll find in the future, the harder you work, the luckier you're going to get.
That's very true. No,
Yeah.
I just figured that out too. Getting like a little taste of that. Definitely. Thank you so much. And I really am passionate about representing Hueneme because I grew up here and I really love where I'm from. So to be able to like represent the youth and all the hardworking leaders that have reached me to this goal is really an important thing for me. And I don't know how ambitious I would be without winning. So I hope to win the next round and keep on going and represent and put Oxnard on the map.
Well, good luck in that. Yes,
Madam
and Councilmember Berg.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'd also like to say, regardless of the outcome of any future competition, you're already a winner. Keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I
yeah.
will keep that in mind.
So I do have a certificate of recognition in recognition of your service and dedication to our community and in honor of the prestigious award from the Boys and Girls Club as the Youth of the Year, and it's signed by all 5 of us, including Laura.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Smile, you're in the background.
Make sure I'm in there. Are you photo bombing? Yeah. All right.
3 brothers, and this is Mom? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, congratulations. Yeah, thank you. Good luck in your future.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your words and cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's cool. Okay, so next we have an Arbor Day presentation, and I'll read some of this proclamation here. So this is a proclamation from the City of Port Hueneme honoring Arbor Day in the City of Port Hueneme, which happens then to be part of an actual date, the second Thursday in March. And so whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas the holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce wind and water erosion of our precious topsoil, lower our heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, including what we read here from the City Council on the dais and the agenda. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of Port Hueneme hereby proclaim the second Thursday in March as Arbor Day in the City of Port Hueneme, and all citizens are urged to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. We urge all citizens to plant and care for trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Signed, all of us. We do need Laura's signature on here. And so you have a presentation for us, I believe?
Yes, I'm just going
to very
recite
good.
some items here. Good evening, City Council members and City staff. My name is Charles Cable. I'm the Principal Engineer with the Public Works Department. It's my privilege to present the proclamation honoring Arbor Day in the City of Port Hueneme. We have an Arbor Day ceremony scheduled for this Saturday, March 7th at 10:30 a.m. at the Port Hueneme Historical Society Museum. We invite all you to come out and join us in the tree planting ceremony this Saturday, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. We have handouts in the back with details and location information. We also have information on the event at the city website and the social media. We urge all citizens to plant and care for our trees and celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. In collaboration and with input from the museum, we have selected the Western Redbud, or commonly known as the California Redbud. It is easily recognized when it is in bloom from March to May, when it is covered with small pink to purple flowers. In holding this event, and having issued the proclamation, we will be in compliance with our Tree City USA designation. I want to give special thanks to Larry Downing, the museum curator, and Stephen Alkrantz, our Public Works engineering aide, for scheduling and coordinating this event. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cable. Any questions or comments from council members here?
Where is it going to be planted?
We selected an area right in front of a tree that was actually dying. We're going to remove that. It's at the west side of the museum.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, this is a good way to recognize then our participation with Tree City USA.
Right.
And I know we've done this every year, that we've been part of this program. So we invest a lot of money here at the city to take care of our trees. I think it's, one of the line items in the budget, if I'm not mistaken, for Mr. Villafana every year to take care of our assets here, being
Right.
the trees. And so with all of that, we acknowledged then we needed to be part of that Tree City USA.
Right.
So can I give you this proclamation?
Of course, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then we move on to the third presentation here from the Ventura County Air Pollution District. Air Pollution Control District, right? Okay, thank you. So we queued up for the presentation?
Fantastic.
Wonderful,
This
thank
is my,
you.
okay, excellent. Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members and staff. Very pleased to be here. I'm Lucky Tesopoulos, the Air Pollution Control Officer with the district. So I'll give you a status update on the state of air quality in the city of Port of Hueneme and a status update on the ongoing APCD investigation on the odor issues that we have been dealing with for quite some time. So if I had to talk about air quality here in the city, your beautiful city, my presentation was going to be very, very short. Just one slide. The air quality is really good here in Port Hueneme. And even though we have some source of pollution around us, because of our proximity to the ocean, because of the ocean breezes, things do get scattered around. And generally speaking, air quality is good. We are meeting the federal ozone standard, the federal coarse particulate PM10 standard, and the fine particulate PM2.5 standard. We do, however, our key concern is we do get quite a few complaints about odors and noise from the two neighboring facilities, namely the wastewater treatment facility and the New Indy facility. So most of my comments today and my remarks will focus on those, on our observations regarding those two facilities. And I have to tell you, I've been with the agency for 6 months, and I remember like yesterday, you have an excellent representative at our board, Mr. Rollins, and it was my very first meeting with the board. And before I even finished the hello, and they finished, the welcome to Ventura, he comes down the dais, around the dais, and pats me on the back and says, look, buddy, we have an odor issue here in Port Hueneme. You need to put it on your agenda. You need to put it on your radar screen. And he reminds me of that every month we meet. So it will go as no surprise to you if I'll tell you those two facilities were the very first two facilities that I did visit personally, my very first month that I've been here in Ventura. So my slides basically summarize my observations and my staff observations. Basically, the complaints about odors and noise that we have been receiving, they peaked in 2018. The frequency, we still do receive odors, continue to receive complaints, but the frequency has somehow reduced, and we believe some of the recent upgrades and improvements that the facilities have already performed at their sites are contributing to this downward trend on the complaint frequency. And we believe with the additional plan improvements, we'll continue seeing those frequencies getting further reduced. Generally speaking, the odors that we observe in the wastewater treatment facility were stronger than the odors we observe in the New Indy facility. Now, the fact that the proximity between the two facilities and the community being what it is, basically having zero buffer in between, doesn't help in easily resolving this odor issue. And perhaps looking at the map, perhaps will make those that a little bit clearer. What you see, let's see, is this? Oh yeah, it works. So within the yellow perimeter, we have the wastewater treatment facility, and within the green perimeter, we have the New Indy facility. And the community is right adjacent, right at the fence of the wastewater treatment facility, the bungalows, the hideaways, the surf side. So this complicates things a little bit. And if you look at the wind patterns, basically in the morning, we have the onshore winds, and whatever pollution or odors emissions may be accumulating over those plants, the direction of the wind will take them away from the community. Unfortunately, in the early evenings or early morning hours, the wind pattern will change, and whatever accumulation we have over those two facilities will take it towards and through the community. So, so some of the key challenges, and we can take the facilities one facility at a time. Some of the challenges that we have is the fact that the wastewater treatment facility is a super old facility, vintage 1950s, mid-50s. So we are talking about 65, 70-year-old facility. There are multiple sources of potential emissions. We have the headworks where the primary preliminary treatment takes place. We have the primary treatment tanks here very close to the community, those 4 tanks. We have the biotires, we have the digestion tanks, we have solid processing facilities. They all can contribute to odorous emissions. And the type of emissions that we are talking about are the H2S, or the hydrogen sulfide. They smell like rotten eggs. Or amines or mercaptans. These are compounds that have the element of nitrogen or the sulfur within them, and they result in the onion smell, the earthy, the mossy smell, depending on what the chemical composition is. And it's basically the byproduct of the anaerobic decomposition of organic compounds, very similar to the way our organism, our digestive system works, and we all produce emissions similar to those, and we expel them through burps or some other means. The same way those facilities, the wastewater treatment facilities, produce those emissions. They are typically, the good news is, they are typically in very small quantities, so they are not in large quantities that will result in adverse health effects. Unfortunately, the downside is the human nose is so sensitive that even in very low concentration, if we have, I'll call it a burp, my apologies for the expression, if we have a small volume of air pocket sitting over a tank, if the wind happens to be blowing towards the community, it will take it and if you happen to be watching your TV with your windows open, it will hit you. I mean, you will be able to smell it. They're so small in quantity, sometimes you may go to the next door bedroom or next door neighbor and you may not smell a thing, but they're perceptible, those emissions, in very small quantities. And again, because of the proximity and there is no buffer in between the facilities and the community, doesn't help the predicament that we are in. There are technological solutions to the problem. They will necessitate multi-year investments and multi-million-dollar investments. And the good news is there are plans to do that, and I'll cover some of these improvements in my subsequent slides. There are already 3 active control units installed at the facility, 1 chemical scrubber and 2 biological scrubbers. And clearly, if we are still smelling odors, that means we either having fully optimized those units, or perhaps we need to augment those units. Perhaps we need to install additional controls to other potential sources of emissions. The facility has a 10-year capital improvement plan that is implementing it in 3 phases. The first phase is already implemented and complete. We are currently going through phase 2, which covers the year 3 through 5, while years 5 through 10 is the 3rd phase where they are seeking to further modernize the plant. And the good news is the facility and the city has already adopted the rate increases. They secured some of the state grants that they need to secure, and they are seeking additional funding for the remainder of the project. And those of you who, of course, who are living here in this community as well as at the Oxnard community, you know how difficult some of those rate increases were. But the good news is the money, at least the funding, is there to move forward with those improvements. So in my next few slides, I'm going to cover some of the current controls that we think has worked terrifically in reducing these odors, and some of the planned future control actions. So let me start with the chemical injection pilot that was recently completed. They are basically 3 sewage trunk lines, 3 lines coming into the city, and the facility has injected a chemical, a ferrous chloride, that has the ability to attach itself to the sulfur emissions and retain them within with the wastewater and prevent its release to the air. It has been a terrific success. It wasn't necessarily the first time that we are experimenting with it here at Oxnard. Other facilities has experimented with the same chemical with the same level of success. And now that we know that this has worked, there are plans to treat the remaining 2 trunks, 2 sewage lines with the same chemicals. The facility also plans to use hydrogen peroxide to regenerate the spent iron. The headwork facility is the very first facility where they conduct the very preliminary treatment of the wastewater coming in, and it can be a source of very intensive, very offensive odors. The good news is there is already one control already installed. It's a 3-stage control system that works fine. It is a very large area that is trying to service it. There are practically 2 buildings. And it may perhaps be a little bit overwhelmed. So there are plans to install now a 2nd unit, and when that gets installed and installation is complete, it will contribute greatly to further reducing those odors. With respect to the primary clarifiers, these are the 4 tanks, open tanks, that are very close to the fence line. Right across the line, there are some condos and some residences in very close proximity. So this is a very old installation. Normally, in a new wastewater treatment plant, those would have been fully enclosed. In this particular case, they are fully open tanks. And normally, this is the top of the tank. Whoops. This is the top of the tank. Normally, you won't smell much. However, as the water overflows down those weir openings and down those boxes, through turbulence, whatever H2S molecules are embedded, included in the wastewater, do get released during that turbulence. And they accumulate and slightly start rising up. And if the wind blows, that H2S will migrate all the way to the community. The good news, again, is there are plans to, they experimented with some enclosures of the boxes, and there are plans to install enclosures all around the perimeter of the tanks, and everything that is going to be captured there is going to be vented through a control device. And when that happens, for sure, we are going to feel the difference. With respect to the biotowers, there are 2 biotowers right here where they provide secondary treatment of the wastewater. Again, these are very old technologies. Many modern plants no longer rely on those biotowers. The biotowers rely on microbes to take care of business. And when the temperature is right, when the pH is right, typically those biotowers will work just fine. But if they go off spec, they may result in some emissions, and that's when you get the mossy or earthy-like type of emissions. The good news is there are long-term plans to take those 2 tanks out of circulation. They have just completed the construction of a chemically enhanced primary treatment facility, and as that facility goes online, it will pave the way for the removal of those biotowers in the next few years.
Yes, I think there's a question here. Councilmember Gama.
So where will that new tank be? Is it a tank or is it?
It's a tank. It's a tank, and it's in very close proximity. Jason, I don't have a specific picture, but it's already constructed. So what they need to do is they need to experiment with some polymers and do some trial and error, which will take some time. But once that happens, then it will pave the way to slowly removing those biotowers.
Will it be 1 tank or 2 tanks?
Both of the tanks.
I mean, will they build
the chemically treatment tank is 1 tank.
Nice.
But it will help eliminate 2 biotowers, two biotower tanks.
Okay, thanks.
They also improve their housekeeping procedures. For instance, There used to be trailers waiting to be filled with biosolids to be hauled away from the facility. And in the past, those trailers would be contaminated and baking under the sun and generating all sorts of odors that you can imagine. Nowadays, the operators are required to fully wash those tanks while they are waiting, helping minimize the nuisance odors. There are H2S monitoring systems in the perimeter, and if you walk to the lobby of the facility, you can see in real time what those monitors read in the perimeter of the facility. And they also have the 24-hour odor hotline where if residents sense odors, they can complain about them, just like they do with the Air Pollution Control District. And we collaborate, the agency with the facility, and we compare notes. So all these improvements basically help, we believe, to reduce the frequency of complaints that we have been receiving, which peaked in 2018. And as you can see, and these are monthly records, the frequency have reduced substantially. We are not declaring victory yet and we won't declare victory until that curve hits the zero line and stays permanently at the zero line. But at least we are encouraged for the fact that it's trending in the right direction. And we believe with the improvements that I outlined, we are in not too distant future, we are going to be hitting those zero lines. With respect to the new Indy facility, our key observation is that there are some odors, but much lighter compared to what we observed in the previous facility. And these are mostly recycled wet paper odors. And we are fortunate that the facility relies on the raw material is recycled paper, because if it was virgin paper, there are typically much stronger odors associated with this kind of a process. But with the recycled paper, the odors are at bay. Now, we also reviewed all the solvents, adhesives, and other chemicals that are being used in the facility that has the potential to produce odors, and we didn't find any likely candidates. We did approve a rule just a few months ago, 4 months ago, that will further reduce ammonia slip emissions from the facility from 20 parts per million down to 10 parts per million, and it will reduce the NOx emissions from 12 parts per million down to 5 parts per million, which will also help improve the overall air quality. Now, we've been getting quite a few complaints about loud noises originating from the facility, and we think the two silencers, older silencers, corroding silencers, are the likely culprits. The good news is they are both slated for replacement. The facility purchased 2 new ones. One already has been installed, and the second one is slated for installation sometime by May of this year. Also, the facility stopped the practice of using the pager system at nighttime for nighttime communication, and replaced that with radio communication. And they also stopped the practice of using the night bells, which also will go a super long way in addressing some of those community concerns. And they are taking regular noise measurements just to make sure the decibels stay at bay. So just to conclude, we are encouraged with the noticeable progress that we have seen so far, but clearly more is needed to be done to fully address the odor issue. We do expect see further progress, and based on the significant capital improvement commitments that the facilities have made, we are encouraged with the open dialogue that the facilities are engaged in. And on our end, the APCD will continue our regular inspections, our periodic meetings with the facilities, just to make sure that we are progressing as we are supposed to. And we want to facilitate information exchange between these facilities and other similar facilities like the Ventura wastewater facility and others. They used to have smaller facilities perhaps, but they used to have similar odor issues there as well. Somehow they managed to overcome those, and perhaps there are lessons to be learned, so we want to facilitate that information exchange. And based on all of the above, we believe that the air that we breathe will continue getting cleaner. and I'm going to stop here, and I'll see whether you have any questions. And rest assured, Mr. Rollins, we'll keep this on my radar screen, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Tisopoulos. Any questions from the council? Councilmember Berg?
No questions really, Lackey. I just want to say thank you very much for coming. I think this speaks to the importance that you lend to this problem that's been ongoing for some time. I'm heartened to see the progress being made, but that your vigilance, that you're going to keep following up with them. We appreciate you being here in Ventura County with us. Welcome again. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Councilmember Gama?
Yes, first of all, your presentation skills are excellent. You took a complex subject and you made it very understandable for us in a positive way, and I appreciate that. And I'm a little impressed with your photography skills too, because this last picture is really nice. And
Thank you. Thank you. I thought, closing the presentation with a nice picture of the beautiful city that you guys all serve in would be a nice touch.
Yes,
Thank
and then
you.
one last thing.
Yeah.
So in the city of Port Hueneme, the two facilities you talked about are in the city of Oxnard.
Oxnard, yes.
Yes, but on Surfside Drive, there's a company, I think it's called Pack Foundries, and I think they engage in plastic injection molding.
Mm-hmm.
And one night, I caught a whiff of that place,
Okay.
and I was like, hey, maybe this is some of the complaint originator, because my understanding is about once a month when they prepare a new batch,
Yes.
it's a crazy smell. It's a nasty smell. It's a plastic.
Injection molding, because it operates in high temperatures, it is possible. Could you please repeat the name of the facility for me?
I believe it's
PAC.
PAC Foundries, yeah.
Foundries.
But,
Okay. And the location was?
Surfside Drive.
Surfside Drive.
Yeah.
We'll find it. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
So I had brought it up before, like thinking, maybe that's a part of this odor. Because sometimes, like you said, if the wind's going in the right direction, nobody smells it. But man, if you catch it when it's hot.
Yes, it's possible. It's a possibility.
Yes.
And thank you for the reconnaissance. I have my enforcement manager here and my inspector will follow through.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Rollins?
No, I just want to thank you for your short time here, making this a priority and listening to me, and then, coming through with a really nice presentation. For the audience, Dr. Lackey has had over 25 years of experience working in the Orange County Air Pollution Board, so he comes with a wealth of knowledge from a variety of different areas, so that I think we're well served for you being at the helm. And just what I mentioned last week, our last council meeting, over the course of the last number of years, our periods of time where we've had clean air has expanded in volumes. Even though the standards have gone up over the years, we've still kept it there. So you guys are all doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Councilmember Berg?
Lackey, I found that address for Pack Industries at 705 Industrial Avenue.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Tisopoulos, thank you so much for joining us today and for putting together a comprehensive presentation.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting to see that your records note that since, the peak was 2018 and it's gone down since then. I don't know if that means people have stopped reporting or what. But, certainly when things heighten up a little bit, we get emails, we get phone calls,
Right.
and so I know that Councilmember Rollins will keep you abreast of what's going on here in the city.
Absolutely.
But we appreciate your diligence on this and your follow-through. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so with that, we are on consent calendar agenda. And I will read the titles of the items on the consent calendar prior to the motion. Item number 4 on consent is approve the minutes of the city council, and so there's actually 3 notes here. A joint port and city workshop on January 27th, 2020, the regular meeting of February 3rd, the regular meeting of February 7th, the regular meeting of February 18th. Item number 5, approve finance cash disbursements for February 7th through February 24th of 2020. And then item number 6, read by title only, waiving full reading of text and adopt an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, amending section 4201 and adding sections 4210 through 4214 to chapter 3 of Article 4 and adding sections 4311 through 4313 to Chapter 4 of Article 4 of the Municipal Code relating to camping, storage of personal property, wheeled vehicles, and sleeping in or around the beach, park, wharf, or pier. With that, we did receive an email from one of our residents with respect to that item. And then item number 7, read by title only, waiving full reading of text and adopt an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, adding Article 6, Chapter 1, Part A, Sections 6011.1 through 6011.2 of the Municipal Code, imposing liability on owners of property for repairs, cleaning, and maintenance of sidewalks and driveways, and providing for recovery of public works maintenance cost pursuant to a lien in accordance with the California Streets and Highways Code, Section 5610, etc. And so as we're going to take a roll call vote here, I just want to let my council members know, as well as the audience and the residents, is that on item number 7, I did check in with California Joint Powers and Insurance Authority, and we're on the right track with what we need to do in order to make sure that we're assessing our sidewalks every year and putting together a plan to get them fixed, as well as we'll be working, and that's Mr. Charles Peretz, who's following through on this, will be working with the JPIA and a master service agreement that they have with Precision, which is a company that has worked in different municipalities throughout the area. So with that, we're right in line with what they prescribe for a city to do in this regard. So with that, is there a motion for consent calendar? Oh, yes, Councilmember Gama.
I would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar. However, I want to vote no on item 7, so I don't know how to do that, and I don't think we need to discuss it anymore, but so when I make a motion to approve the consent calendar, do I vote yes? With my noted objection to 7. Okay, so with that, I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as stated.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so Madam City Clerk, do you want to do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Gama?
Yes.
Yes, except for on item number 7. Councilmember Rollins?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Munoz-Schnapp?
Yes.
And Mayor Hernandez is absent.
Okay, so it's 401 vote here for moving on the consent calendar. And then we don't have any public hearings, and we do have one item here on for a business item, and that's our city manager, as well as the deputy city manager, and we have what's called the Citizens Advisory Commission Purview. And so with that, Mr. Peretz, you'll be handling this presentation.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Pro Tem. For the record, Charles Peretz, Deputy City Manager. Item number 8 on the agenda is a discussion of the purview of the Citizen Advisory Commission. I have a very brief presentation which is intended to enable conversation and direction from the council regarding the purview of items that will be subject to review by this body. The city's 2017 Strategic Action Plan articulated a desire to create a Citizen Advisory Commission to serve as a sounding board for city council decision-making. Resolution 4197 established the Citizen Advisory Commission to advise council on those matters the council deems appropriate for the commission's consideration. Deliberations on this item are intended to provide the council the opportunity to discuss and ultimately decide which matters it wishes the commission to review and provide advisory input. The staff report contains suggestions to assist the council in its deliberations regarding the scope of this commission. That concludes my brief presentation. And again, the report is intended to enable the conversation. I know that some of the council members have had interest in this matter, in getting the commission started. The staff is ready to answer questions and or receive direction from the commission regarding those items that we wish to calendar for the commission's discussion.
Okay. So with that, I know Mr. Peretz has spoken to us, has worked with the folks that are or have been appointed by this body, and so it's just trying to gauge what we end up encouraging this group to undertake for us on behalf of the city council, but then on behalf of our residents and the community. So with that, does anybody want to start with the discussion? Yes, Councilmember Rollins.
Okay. One of my concerns with the Citizen Advisory Board when it was adopted is because it's so broad-based. There's a wide variety of areas that you can go into. And it's been my experience in other cities that commissions were a little bit more focused on particular areas. That they knew they were going into that particular area with that particular focus. That being said, one of the things that I would like to see, and it seems apropos since we're spending a lot of time and effort on it, is we're moving into the Rec and Park Master Plan. And there's going to be a lot of community input, and we're going to be spending hopefully a lot of money to benefit the community in a variety of different recreation, community service programs that will benefit from youth to seniors. And so I would like the Citizen Advisory Board to be actively involved in focusing on the plan and giving input and reaching out to the community so that we can develop a plan that will truly meet the needs of the community in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so noted. Councilmember Gama.
So this was developed in 2017, and the majority of this council wasn't seated. So that's a concern of mine. And then secondly, our new city manager hasn't been able to develop and opine on what he would like to see. And, I've been on the job, 3 weeks now, 2 weeks, so, and also, yes, very brief presentation, but, where's the bylaws of this organization? I think it's really important. And Mr. Rollins just mentioned a master plan for parks and recreation. And if I'm not correct, I believe we have a consultant working on that we allocated a significant amount of money. Was it $500,000 or no?
No, that's the other one. No.
Yeah, okay, excuse me. Anyways, it's a significant amount of money. And in other cities, when they would establish a park and rec commission, for example, I believe the commission would be loaded with people that have a lot of experience in those areas. So I'm thinking that we need to understand the bylaws, the rules for the commission, and then decide, what kind of issues are they going to work on. And I see some of the lists here, like the Hueneme Beach Festival is already in the planning stages. Things are being signed, executed, and it's well on its way. So I guess we could scratch that one off the list. So I'm just wondering if we are ready to move forward. And then the other thing is that each one of us appoint a person, and I guess this is more of a legal question. Are we allowed to direct our appointee, or are we allowed to, say, these are things that we don't know. And so, again, there's literally one page on the City Advisory Commission, Citizen Advisory Commission. And then, so there's a lot of questions as to how it functions legally. And then the last thing is that we're working on our current strategic plan, and should not this be a part of our current strategic plan that we're working on? And those are my questions or concerns.
And so I think, Mr. City Attorney, did you have an answer for?
Oh, well, the answer is that no, when a Brown Act body is formed, as the council formed this body, the process for selecting who will sit on the body was determined by the council to be appointment by each council member of one representative. But once they're seated on that commission, then they act independent of direction by the council member. There really wouldn't be a whole lot of point in having a commission if they were just going to do otherwise you could just do it yourselves, if you follow what I'm saying. So the idea of these kinds of committees is that they will do work in a direction that you want, that saves you work, that enables them to look in more detail and turn over more rocks and look into more facts, so that they can then come back and say, well, here's what we found out about this issue. And it enables you then to make a more informed decision about what you want the city to do.
Yeah, so it was prior to the Citizens Advisory Committee, we actually had different advisory groups. And it was decided back prior to this council, this group, that we would consolidate and do away with those and establish this one instead. And it was then realized that it would be an appointment by each of the council members on this dais to find somebody who would like to serve. And, some folks came with experience, and some, felt that they could learn through all of this. But first and foremost, I believe it was a group that could then express whatever this group decided that would be important for them to handle. I know Councilmember Berg has always said, we want them to be successful. We don't want to give them a really difficult situation to handle. We want them to be successful. And so it's in that idea that we wanted to generate basically like the direction that you all felt we should give this group. Overall, it wasn't going to be where they were going to form and identify things that they wanted to do and move forward. That wasn't the issue at all. The issue is that they get direction from us through our staff to then start working on some of these items. And it would be our hope then that this group would prioritize, would identify then those things that we'd like for them to move forward on. We don't have to decide it tonight. We can then punt the ball and, and ask for some more documentation if that's what you feel most comfortable with. I mean, it doesn't have to happen tonight, but it is where we do need to move this forward. We do need to start giving our staff direction. And so we thought that this would be a great meeting to at least start the ball rolling.
May I ask, for example, it's my understanding that used to be a recreational committee, and I think there used to be a board that decided what the museum would do
There
or
was
not
a
do.
Recreation and Fine Arts. There was a Council on Aging, and what was the third one? I can't remember what the third one was. And I'm looking in the audience to see if there's anybody that has served in this community longer. The museum. So that was the three. So those were the three that were, in essence, consolidated into one. We still have, though, the museum, up and running, and that was then separate from this Citizens Advisory.
Madam Chair,
yes.
If I can add, I remember the discussion, and of course this was before a number of you were on the council, but I remember the discussion being, in addition, that it was quite often difficult to even get a quorum of, because we had all these various committees and commissions, it was very difficult sometimes to get a quorum even to meet of those committees, because we're a small community. There aren't that many people who have the time and energy or desire to serve in these functions, and they have lives to live, and so it's hard for them to make meetings that are scheduled, you know, in a general convenience as opposed to their specific convenience. So I think part of the idea of this was to focus it down to one committee, give it a better chance of functioning as it should, meaning holding regular meetings where everybody, or at least most everybody, shows up for every meeting, and there's a continuity of consideration and attendance. So I think that was part of the reason for consolidating. I know through my tenure here that I've heard repeated discussion among staff that it's very hard to get even just getting final membership on this body and the Measure U committee was difficult, because in the interim people were moving or other events occurred in their life, and then we were back to trying to fill a position, and so it's a moving target just to try and keep people involved.
Yeah, and you know, certainly with the Fine Arts Committee, they actually did do some work for the Beach Festival that we had in the past. So, you know, there were some assignments for sure that some of these previous groups had. But now that I recall what you've been saying, it was where getting the quorum for the meetings was difficult. And I know even Carmen Nichols served as one of the staff people that, you know, that helped one of those groups. And then another previous person served as the other. So it was divvied up among the staff to make sure that they were staffed groups that when they would meet and record and, you know, move along on the items that they felt were important. Yes, Councilmember Rollins.
I don't know. I have faith in the Port Hueneme residents to get involved and to get actively involved in, like, making our community better. And I know all of us took a lot of time to seriously vet who we wanted to be on this committee, not that they were just going to be a figurehead, but in fact they were going to actively get involved in bettering the community. And while it may not be, you know, the commission may evolve as far as what they are involved in, I think it's real important that we sit on, at least initially, on maybe one or two things to get them going. I know, like, I know I've heard a lot of frustration from the people who were asked to be on this board because they wanted to be involved and felt like, they've just been forgotten. And so I'd like, while it may evolve and change, I'd like us to pick one or two things that we could kind of grab our teeth on and do, and then move from there. So.
Yes, Councilmember Berg.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I remember per Councilmember Gama's comments regarding this was formed back in 2017. It's almost 3 years now, and they've yet to have a meeting. It's probably time. So I would encourage that we get them together. I assume they've gone through their Brown Act training, et cetera, so they're ready to rock and roll now as far as I'm concerned. I would like to see them perhaps come up with their own list of bylaws and mission statement, perhaps something of that nature. I think I like the idea of the Parks and Recreation aspect of this. Perhaps our strategic plan, they should want to get involved in that. The Hueneme 75 celebration, that might yet be another thing. However, I'd like to just see them sit down, get to know each other, get going on their bylaws, and come up with maybe some of their own plans that would come back to us and let us, give them the go-ahead, yes, and let's work on that together. So,
I think that is probably a pretty good idea, because our office did sit down and train them on the Brown Act, and in addition to that, we made it clear that this council is not legally permitted to delegate its authority to this commission. So there's no decision-making occurring at this commission level.
Right.
It can only be advisory to you and fact-finding and maybe make recommendations. So, but until you give them some areas in which they are allowed to focus, I don't see them being able to do much.
Mr. City Attorney, I think you've just highlighted the risk of jumping into this, blindly, because the last thing we'd want to do is have a bunch of recommendations coming up that we can't support as a council. So that's kind of been I know that we've talked about it before. So, for example, like the museum, like we've never had a discussion about the visioning for the museum, if we're satisfied where it is and where we'd like to see it go. So to me, that's a really good issue for this advisory commission is to, hey, you know what, let's take a step back, let's look at the museum, where do we want to go with this, what do we want to do with it, how can we improve it, how can we make it better, and then hear back from them. But I'm really concerned, that doesn't sound right, but I'm a little concerned that, we need to see bylaws. We need to see, okay, how is this organization going to run? And if what I hear you correctly is that might be the first thing that we have them work on is, okay, tell us what great things you could assist us with and how you're going to do it.
I understand it could be politically difficult if you get back recommendations that you can't support. But the idea is that you want to be tested by input. And if there's a reason why you can't move forward with it, then you can explain it. But if you want to design it so that they only make recommendations that you can support, then you're really doing the job for them. Right. So I would suggest that you pick 2 or 3 things tonight. Let staff give them the direction on those 2 or 3 to, okay, first thing, organize yourselves. Tell us how you want to be organized. Let staff give you input about what's appropriate. We'll come back and present that to you. In the meantime, here's 2 or 3 things. How do you want to organize looking into these? And then they'll come back and report, and you'll see where they're going.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, is that we would identify 2 to 3, possibly 4 things, and then suggest it to them and have them vet it out and maybe add to the mix and come back with something.
Trial and error, I'm sure. There'll be some trial and error, but that's what happens when you have that kind of process.
And it appears that our point man is right down here to right? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I think it would be a combination of resources from the city manager's office, working with the commission to set the agendas, we'd attend the meetings, and bring information depending on what topics are chosen to them for their review.
So, following up on that, how often is this body going to meet? Was there something set out that it would be 4 times a year, every other month?
No, with regard to Councilmember Gama's question about bylaws, there are no such bylaws. There are no specific guidelines. The resolutions established that it would be a body that would be subject to the Brown Act. So that is why the training that was referenced earlier occurred. And the only other reference, there are references to, in general terms, advising council on matters of crafting political, financial, and budgetary reforms. That was from the 2017 Strategic Action Plan. And then later it was slightly more ambiguous. It would just be matters as determined by the city council. So there's considerable flexibility other than establishing it as a Brown Act committee and establishing the number of members that would constitute the commission. There are no other specific bylaws or direction.
Okay. All right, very good. Councilmember Rollins.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so are you going to be the point staff person to oversee?
Organize.
Yeah, I mean, in each commission, usually there's a staff person to kind of be the point person. I'm assuming, Charles, you're going to be the one.
I'm happy to serve in that role. As I say, I think depending on the topics of interest, we may have other staff members present some information. I'm happy to serve as the staff liaison and coordinate with the commission.
Okay. And so then I would recommend that you get a meeting together with them to develop the bylaws as far as like when they want to meet some basic bylaws that, are maybe perhaps can be brought back to the council that we can say, yes, that's where we want to go with that. And then we could probably add 2 or 3 things, but maybe not. Maybe first of all, we just deal with the bylaws, I think, and get those underway.
Yeah, I would feel really comfortable with that. And then once we have the bylaws presented and approved by a majority of the council, then we could give out an assignment, so to speak, if that's even the proper word. But I mean, I think that would be a pretty challenging task for this advisory commission to come together and develop bylaws and meeting schedules, and they're going to have their own ideas, like I think city attorney said about their mission,
Okay. Did you have something else to add, Councilmember?
That, but, the clock is ticking. It's only been 3 years now, so I think, it's time to move on this. And there's another committee out there that's been formed that's not on the agenda tonight, but we have to consider getting them up and going too, because
I think they are.
we are.
Yeah, there are, yeah.
Have they
You're
met?
talking about Measure
Have
U,
they met?
They have a very limited function because that's
Yeah.
a state law committee,
Good.
and they have a
Yeah.
very limited function, which is to determine that the proceeds of the tax are used in the ways that are appropriate under the law. So
Good.
their function is much more limited than this one. This one has a much broader brief in terms of what it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they may want to meet, more frequently. Who knows? Let them come up with something.
So would it be then the suggestion that we have Mr. Peretz and the city manager go back and help this group craft and develop their bylaws that then they could bring back to city council for review? And want to say like in 2 months, so maybe by May or so, that you've had discussions with them and come back with the bylaws? Would that be fine? Would that be fine with this group?
Good with me. If it's
Is
okay
that-
with staff, it's okay with me.
Is that what you were looking for in terms of recommendations and
Well, I think staff
proceeding
was looking
forward?
for that and some indication from the council as to what kind of topic matters you wanted them to look at, because that lets them start to look at, how can we organize ourselves to deal with this particular kind of a topic. But
I know from reading this report, and as far as the areas that we could possibly get into, again, it seems to a degree a sky's the limit. I would like us to kind of, and I'd be willing to work with it, but focus on 1 or 2 of these things and just start it out, along with getting the bylaws, because any organization, you need to know how often you're going to meet, who's going to be, that's like almost paramount to be starting number 1, but then to give them some meat to kind of be working with a little bit.
So would you all feel comfortable with selecting some or coming up with some that would be recommendations, suggested topics?
I mentioned 2 already. I think it'll be in the notes.
What did you mention? Strategic plan? was
Parks
it?
and Recreation,
Oh, I see, okay.
strategic plan.
Okay.
What else did I?
And we could be generic, Parks and Recreation, community service, and I think a lot of these things kind of fall in line. So when you're presenting it to them, the beaches and those types of things, you could present the beaches, the Wainimi, and see where they'd like to tie into.
I don't understand the strategic plan part, being that we have a strategic plan consultant that's working and putting it together.
That'll be her job to get them involved.
And the Alternative Energy and Equipment and Vehicle Initiative, I don't look at that as something that they would want, that I would see them being a part of, frankly. Because, we've already met, the council's already met to talk. We're bringing in a new group that's going to be looking through all the different energy savings from buildings and equipment and vehicles, so I
Yeah,
don't think.
we have NG.
So I
on
don't
that.
look at that,
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
this
let's,
an action
let's see, yeah, so, let's see if,
Okay.
Councilmember Rollins had anything else to say before we have you take that on? 'Cause I think he was
The
speaking.
strategic plan is very broad. We're putting a lot of resources in it. I'd say I wouldn't want to necessarily see them initially involved in that. The alternative energy and equipment and vehicle initiatives, not so much. Perhaps the Wainimi Beach Festival and the Wainimi at 75, well, not Wainimi at 75 is kind of a community recreation. They may want to get involved in that under that moniker of like recreation and parks and community services. The Sister City program also is something that I think kind of ties into that. The outreach on Mayor's Forum on homelessness, that may tie in with the community parks, but not necessarily initially. And budget reports and proposals, I don't think at all.
So it sounds like we can group some of these under specific categories, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Do we want to tackle that, or do we, because I'm thinking that Wainimi at 75 celebration, that's a couple of years away, so we could probably park that aside for maybe 1 year. It's not so up and current. Some of these others are really things that we're working on right now, so maybe we just eliminate some and then say this could be those things that they consider, because I think that way we can boil it down. So we've knocked out Wainimi at 75 and alternative energy equipment, right? Those two, we're going to say no, not really, for this group to consider. Would that be okay to say that?
No, I mean, I would like to make a motion, and then and hopefully my motion would give us a clear path, and then because
Can I put my opinion in here too?
Sure.
Okay, before you do the motion. So, I would say that as the strategic plan is really very important because it's going to take us into, possibly 10, 15, 20 years down the road, what we want to be when we grow up in terms of the city. So I think getting their input on that would be really important. Bringing back the Wainimi Beach Festival as it was, part and parcel of the city for a long time would be important. I would think that considering the Sister City program, it's trying to get it off the ground. Once it's off the ground, they may not deal with it anymore. It's hopefully going to be another committee. But it would be good to get their input because they're going to ask the community for the input as well on that. So those are the ones that I would think would be important. All right, so any other mention? All right, so we all got an opportunity to voice our opinion. So now, Councilmember Gama, what were you going to say?
So I'd like to propose a motion that we direct city manager to get a meeting so that the advisory commission could establish their bylaws and rules, and then perhaps the city manager could give us recommendations as to ensure their success so that we don't overburden them with a long list of to-do. Maybe we could narrow it down to perhaps 1 or 2 items. But so my motion is, let's get the commission meeting and let's get them to focus on their bylaws and then sort out, go from there.
I thought I heard somebody whisper that. Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Do you want to do no? Okay, all right. So we will then just go for it. Yeah, so all those you wanted?
I just want to.
Okay.
So I think, as I mentioned before, I think it's paramount that we develop the bylaws and get them going. But I would like us to come back to this, assuming that they get the bylaws together fairly soon and get acted, that we actually have some specific subject that they work on or program that they work on. fairly shortly thereafter.
So I think the motion included that there would be recommendations from the city manager along with the bylaws coming back to this council. So does that satisfy you?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, so motion carries unanimously. I think, Mr. City Manager and Mr. Deputy City Manager, you have what you need for this item? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. So, at this point in the agenda, we will
8 o'clock, what?
recess the city council meeting. No, not recess. It's just called to order? It's a joint meeting. Okay. So we are calling then a joint meeting to order. It's the joint session of the Port Hueneme City Council and the Port Hueneme Successor Agency. It is 7:52, and we will have a roll call, please.
So council's already called to order, so I'll be calling you to order as the successor agency. Member Berg,
Here.
Member Gama,
Here.
Member Rollins,
Here.
Vice Chair Munoz-Schnapp,
Here.
and Chair Hernandez is absent.
Okay, so Chair Hernandez has an excused absence. We open with general public comment for a successor agency, so anything that anyone wishes to speak to on the successor agency group that's not on the agenda, you may do so at this time. So seeing none, we then go into the business item for this joint city council and successor agency, and that's item number 9, purchase and sale agreement for Market Street Landing property, and that's Mr. City Manager.
Yes, an opportunity to execute requirements of our successor agency and convert interest in a property set for sale to a future buyer requires us to consolidate those interests. And we have done an appraisal, and we're ready to make a purchase on behalf of the successors and then distribute that sale revenue to those interested parties, all 12 of them.
And so this was because of the dissolution of the redevelopment agency many years ago, and this is part of all of that still?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And it's
Very
part
good.
of the state-approved long-term management plan for those properties, and it's been approved by the state for this disposition.
So, Mr. City Attorney, could you possibly just do a brief summation of this for the public that may be watching online? Because I know it's kind of confusing.
In terms of the parties and how we're doing it?
Yes,
Okay.
that there's 18 parties.
There used to be with an organization that was a part of cities called a redevelopment agency. And the redevelopment agency's function was to identify blighted areas within the city and to take economic steps to induce private development and improvement of those areas through support in various ways. Governor Brown eliminated redevelopment agencies, I think approximately 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was about, yeah.
17?
16. yeah.
16, thank you, about 4 years ago. And since that time, the legislature has adopted a further complicated series of regulations on what happens to those agencies. And it's been complicated because the agencies at the time, many of them owned numerous real properties. Many of them had issued extensive bonds to support in low-income housing or other kinds of development to eliminate blighted areas. So it wasn't just like you could turn it off overnight. There had to be a long process for handling all of those assets in a responsible and prudent manner. What happened was that the state created what's known as the successor agency to the former redevelopment agency of blank city. We have a successor agency to our former redevelopment agency, which is headed by the people at this dais, And it has an obligation under the law to dispose of its properties in accordance with that whole process. At one point in time, we were required to, and this some years ago, we had to submit what's called a long-range property management plan, which identified all of our properties and identified what the intended use would be. That had to be approved by the state of California. We prepared that plan, we submitted it to the state, it was approved. The property that's before you tonight, which is commonly referred to as the Market Street property, which abuts the port and Panoma Street, is one of the properties covered by the plan. In the plan, it said that the property would be acquired by the city for city purposes. That is what we're doing here tonight, which is the city is acquiring the property from the successor agency. The reason that there has to be some formality about this is that redevelopment agencies back in the day got their money from taking tax money from other affected taxing entities like the county, library districts, school districts, and so on and so forth. And so that money is owed back to them when we liquidate the assets. And each city has a percentage of what goes to each entity. It varies from city to city. So the city is going to pay the successor agency the fair market value is determined by a very recent appraisal of somewhere in the area of $1.8 million. It's been determined to be the fair market value. The money that's paid to the successor agency will then be forwarded to the county. The county will disperse it to the affected taxing entities in accordance with the formula that is maintained by the county. A portion of it will actually come back to the city because we're one of the affected taxing entities. So the actual acquisition cost will be closer to $1.4 million for us because we're going to get part of it back. But we have to go this route because that's what the state law requires. So after that occurs, the city can then entertain offers to acquire the property for various purposes. We're in discussions with the port about possible acquisition and so on and so forth, and it can do that once this process is completed, free of the concerns, interests, or involvement of all these other affected taxing entities. So that's what's happening here tonight. Is we're just transferring title and money from the city, the title from the successor agent to the city, and the money from the city to the successor agency, and then the city will then be able to resolve the use of the property and recover its investment and potentially more, depending on what the market will bear. And that's what this is all about. So it's a very confusing history, and I appreciate the opportunity to perhaps clarify it.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope I did.
Councilmember Rollins.
And this is lack of knowledge, were there any other properties that were part of the redevelopment that eventually we're going to have to do the same thing, or is this the only one?
I think this is the only one. There might have been some, a couple along the way that were disposed of in accordance with the prior councils under the long-range management plan. I believe this is the only one left in the successor agency. Okay. Just as a variation to that, in addition to the successor agency, in the law under redevelopment was that 80% of the dollars that we received from these various taxing entities went into redevelopment for various purposes, but 20% had to be spent to promote the preservation and creation of low-income housing. The property that was held by our redevelopment agency that was acquired for housing became the property of our newly created housing authority. And we still have, I believe, some property under that which we are working to use to develop low-income housing as required by the state law. Yeah. So that's one little variation, but the commercial purposes, the commercial properties, this is the last of those.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember Gama.
Yes, so this council decided that it would be easier, even though it's appears to be more complicated, but it'd be easier to satisfy all those lien holders on that property, and then so the city could become the sole property owner, and then we would begin to consider moving forward.
I think there's 12 of those affected taxing entities, so when we're negotiating with a potential buyer, there won't be 12 of us at the table, there'll just be the city.
Yep. Yes, Councilmember Burke.
And this begins the end of the saga, which began in February 1st, 2012, is when the redevelopment agencies began to go away. So 8 years now.
Wow. Well, it's
Yes,
been a long, ugly
it's
process.
been a while, yes, that's for sure. It was ugly when it first came down, and now
and
we're
it's
just
worse,
winding
yeah.
it all down
Honestly,
here.
it was a very bad public policy decision because it put thousands of people out of work. And the governor was hoping to get a bunch of money through the agencies to help balance the budget. And he only got about a third of what he was projecting. So the net effect was calamitous for the state.
And certainly, there's been quite a bit of discussion in Sacramento to say, you know what, we need something else, because RDA went away, but the problems didn't go away, and the issues, the cities,
Now they're trying to craft some new mechanism to do what RDAs were already doing.
Yeah, so, yeah. Anyways, well, thank you for that history. So with that, is there may I have a motion then? Oh, Councilmember Gama, did you want to say something?
Yes, I would like to make a motion.
Oh, okay.
And I understand that we have to make two motions.
We're going to do two motions.
Two motions, okay.
One is city council.
Which we'll do first.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay,
I'm
very
going to
good.
make a motion on behalf of this city council to approve the recommendation to authorize the agency chair on behalf of the city of Port Hueneme to enter into a sale agreement with the successor agency. Is that correct?
Thank you.
For two parcels. Mhm.
As the agreement is presented in
Yep.
the staff, in the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And then, Madam City Clerk, do you want to call roll? for the vote?
Councilmember Gama,
Yes.
Councilmember Rollins,
Yes.
Councilmember Burke,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Munoz-Schnapp,
Yes.
and Mayor Hernandez is absent for the record.
All right, so 401, and so motion carries. And then may I have a motion for the Port Hueneme Successor Agency?
Okay, I will make a motion on behalf of the successor agency and to approve the authorization of the agency chair on behalf of the city of Port Hueneme and the mayor to enter into a purchase and sale agreement between the city and the successor agency.
Okay, so as noted then in the staff recommendation. All right, is there a second?
Yes, I will second that.
Okay, all right. So, Madam City Clerk, we have a motion and second. Can you call roll, please, for the vote?
Member Berg.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. I do the first one. Member Gama,
Yes.
Member Rollins,
Yes.
Member Berg,
Raise your hand.
I want to change my mind. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Munoz-Schnapp.
Yes.
And Mayor Hernandez is absent.
Okay, so that motion then carries 401. All right, thank you so much. So now we move on to the agency members' reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items. So this is for the successor agency. Are there any reports from the members here?
No.
Everybody's going successor agency, that's okay. No, nothing else to comment for this group? All right, so then at this point then we adjourn the successor agency meeting to the next meeting with a date yet to be determined. So thank you so much for that. And we reconvene the city council regular meeting, and so there are only a few other things on our agenda at this point. We are at the council members' reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items. So with that, I'll start at the end of the dais. Councilmember Berg, do you have anything?
Nothing to report, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Gama?
So looking for a mid-year budget review. I know we talked about it at the last meeting and hoping that we could get that soon. I would also like the council to consider a balloon ordinance so that we could prohibit the release of Mylar and latex balloons in the city of Port Hueneme. Another area that I think needs to be looked at is, I know we just passed this sidewalk ordinance, and I notice at Harbor Walk, is it? I'm sorry, but the development on Pleasant Valley, close to the base, there's some coral trees, and they're lifting up the landscape, hardscape curbing, and it's just a matter of time to where the sidewalk is going to be lifted up and needed to be repaired. So I drive by it every morning, and I've been telling myself, I'm going to take a picture and send it in, so I guess I'll do that tomorrow morning. But I would just want to know that let's consider removing the tree before it results in the sidewalk being so damaged that it needs to be replaced. So I would just like to see that that gets taken care of before it gets to be a bigger problem. And that's that.
Okay, and Councilmember Rollins?
Just two things. One, I would like to get an update on the Community Benefit Fund. How much money is still available to be utilized on the Community Benefit Fund, and perhaps some kind of discussion by the by the council as to areas that they would like to see some of that money spent, and maybe kind of a report if there's been any kind of temporary or any kind of proposed ideas from both the port and the acting council committee as to what they've come up to at this particular point. The other area, I guess, that I had mentioned was the Pleasant Valley. There's an area that I'm assuming is Navy property on the, I guess on the north side of Pleasant Valley Boulevard, on the west side of Ventura. There's kind of some area there that I happened to drive by there the other day, and it looks kind of beat up. And I just wanted to see if we could get a report on if there's. Huh? No, there's this kind of streetscape. Well, it's on the west side. That's just kind of a bunch of weeds, and I think it's run by. I brought it up to the city staff. It's on the north side of Pleasant Valley to the west of Ventura Boulevard. And just to get because I just happened to go there and it's just all beat up, and I just wanted to know if there's anybody who maintains it. Is there any plans to, because it looks kind of blighted. And then, so those two areas, I'll stick with that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And for me, I have attended a couple of meetings so far with the Regional Defense Partnership as I'm the alternate, and Mayor Hernandez is the board member. And last week, we actually had a strategic planning meeting for the Washington visit that we have planned for April 27th through 29th. And one of the major priorities, of course, just to let you all know, is this beach erosion. That this is front and center, number one. And what we have seen and what they've realized too is that the efforts to replenish the sand here in Hueneme, and over the course of time, not that it hasn't been the magnitude that we need to replenish the sand on our beach, has actually, we know it's been eroding here. They're facing erosion even faster downstream, which would end up being Magoo. And so, and it's hit critical areas now along the coast. So it's an all-hands-on-deck kind of effort. And it's, not only the teams that we work with here in terms of the County of Ventura and the harbor who takes, first place on that, but it's really a concerted effort alongside with the military and many more stakeholders than before. So we'll see what happens when we get back to DC, but that's one of possibly 7 items that we're taking back and really focusing our meetings with the folks that be in DC on matters, and that's top. One other thing I want to mention too is that the Sister City program that we joined, it's Sister Cities International, that we are actually the host city for the next meeting for Southern California. And so if you want to mark your calendars down for Saturday, March the 28th, the group starts meeting at 9 o'clock. And it's going to be here at the Orving Carpenter Community Center. We'll host anywhere from 40 to 60 individuals coming from different cities throughout Southern California that actually do have sister city programs. And we're hoping that with our meeting here, it really regenerates some of the other neighboring cities that have either faltered and or they're trying to come up with a resurgence of sorts for their sister city program. So it'll be here from 9 to about 1 o'clock. We do have lunch together, and then the board of the Sister City Southern Cal group has a meeting after our lunch, and they conclude at about 3 o'clock. So all of you are welcome to come out. I know that the agenda will probably have the city manager making some short comments or comments, the mayor possibly making some comments. We'll extend the invitation to the Consul General of Mexico, because many of the cities that are part of Sister City do have a sister city in Mexico. So it's always going to be something of importance for our partners in this program. And although we don't have an opportunity to visit these wonderful assets that we have, like the beach and the museum, and the lighthouse and the CV museum and all that, we are going to suggest that to the members who attend this meeting, that they could go and explore on their own. But we have wonderful things for our community here. So that's it for me for reports. All right, so let's move on to public comment continuation. So this is where we continue then that portion from earlier in the agenda to take comments from the community on matters not on the agenda. And so seeing that no one's going to be commenting here, we will adjourn this meeting to the regular scheduled meeting on Monday, March the 16th, 2020, to be held here at 6:30 at City Hall Council Chambers. Thank you.